And remind me, I'll get back to the pub crawl later, but we got callers waiting, and I promise. So, Mike?
Hi.
How you doing?
This is a little bit like being in a Godzilla movie with a time delay, so I have to adjust it. But anyway, my topic is the afterlife. What you were saying about faith, I think of faith as like being an automatic pilot. And that's kind of what I think that is. Anyway, I called earlier last year. I had this notion about the afterlife, and obviously you don't believe in it, right?
Right.
Right. And so, well, you don't, let's say you don't believe in it, say you don't see any evidence of it, et cetera. My theory is that if you can you agree that nothing lasts forever? If life doesn't, then nothing.
Not necessarily.
Life doesn't. I don't mean like mountains and stuff like that. But eventually, entropy, things break down, right?
Okay. Quickly, if you're only talking about life, yes, I believe that, I'm going to die off, and I think it's most likely that life will cease to exist. It's possible that the universe will continue to expand, entropy will take us to the point of heat death, and then there will be nothing alive or moving or anything else. But there'll still be matter, and there'll still be a universe that exists. It's also possible that the universe may contract and proceed kind of backwards-ish, not really in time, but in its structure, until another explosion or expansion comes. We don't know enough about it. We're looking at a very tiny fragment of time and using math and physics to understand it. But if you're just saying that it's most likely that at some point in the very distant future there'll be nothing left alive in the universe as we know it, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay. Well, then if we say that life, just your own, say you in particular, as an example, or me, our life comes to an end, mm-hmm. and every endeavor we ever have comes to an end. Then, isn't the dirt nap you take after you die, shouldn't that also come to an end?
No.
As far as I am concerned, when I die, things will happen to the matter of my body that go on, but in terms of my consciousness and my mind, it's over within a matter of minutes of my heart stop beating.
Well, see, the problem is what he's actually saying. He's saying your life came to an end. Shouldn't your non-life also come to an end? And that's part of the reason why when I answered your question initially, I talked about living things coming to an end, but matter continuing to exist. Mm-hmm. So, no, my dirt nap, there's no reason for me to think my dirt nap should come to an end because there's not life there. It's just matter.
Okay. I've called before and I've said that I'm not really concerned with the existence of God and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But my concern is soul. And I kind of firmly believe that we all have a soul because, that's why I bring these questions up. But for instance, we're all separate from each other. Like, I don't know what's going on in the mind of anybody else. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And so if we have that identity, no matter how many people are born, that's how many souls get pumped out. That I can't believe that something comes out of nowhere. And then...
Hey, you know one quick solution to that's just to stop believing in the existence of a soul.
Solves a lot of problems.
I say that kind of humorously. My thing is that, okay, you're not concerned about the existence of God, and I understand that. You are concerned about souls, and that's fine. There are plenty of atheistic and pantheistic and various other religions that don't have the idea of a God, but still have some idea of a soul. I'm just wondering what is your reason for believing that a soul actually exists, that we as individuals each have some kind of, and what is the definition of a soul? I mean, if you're talking about something that you think is transcendent or supernatural, I mean, I see no evidence for that. If you want to speak metaphorically about the human spirit or the awareness and consciousness and what makes us us, okay, I usually don't use the word soul, but I have no problem accepting that something like that exists. I just think that the best explanations that we have for those phenomena are all derived from the brain. There's nothing about who we are, what we do, what we know, what we remember, the decisions that we make, the way we feel. There's nothing about that conscious entity that can't be attributed directly to chemical, physical, electrical impulses in the brain. So what evidence is there that there's something else, that there's some soul thing that makes me me and is likely to survive after my death?
Okay, let me take this. You said these chemical impulses that start stimulate the brain.
Sure.
What fired those impulses?
What fired them?
Yeah, what started? You need a starter to start an engine or to start a light bulb. What fired those impulses in your brain?
Your brain's constantly working.
I mean, from day one, from the day of your birth.
It's one of those things that I certainly don't understand, at least. But yeah, I mean, there is some kind of starter, for lack of a better term. I don't know if it's just plain biology. It's always going on, but
I mean, your brain, from the moment that the cells begin to divide, and the DNA begins to do its work in building a future human being, your brain begins to develop. And at some point, it is developed sufficiently, and it has neurons and chemicals that it begins to fire. It's kind of like asking, what makes the rubber band break when I stretch it far enough? At some point, it gets to the point where the resilience of the rubber band, the tensile strength, fails and the rubber band breaks. And while I'm no expert in brain development at all, we do have enough understanding of the process. I wish this is one of those weeks where I wish we could just call up P.Z. Myers, and because he could explain it in a heartbeat, or maybe
there might actually be a slightly better explanation than this. My initial thought is a battery. Basically, when you make a battery, it's just two different metals or acids or chemicals that are put together. Now, in the battery making plant, they don't put these chemicals together and then somehow give it a jolt or a jump start to actually make it start producing electricity. It's just whenever you put this stuff and this stuff together, chemical reactions happen and electricity is produced.
Right.
I would think that it's possibly the same kind of things in the brain, that once you get these certain chemicals and everything together, reactions start happening.
The bigger thing is, though, and I don't know, maybe our explanation is correct, maybe you're willing to buy it, maybe you're not. My thing is that even if we couldn't explain the jump start, which I'm not convinced that there is a jump start really, but even if there was a jump start and we couldn't explain it, why does a soul work as an explanation? Why is it okay to explain something that we're trying to understand in terms of something else that we have no evidence for and don't understand?
Well, I think of it, soul is something that gets inflamed, that nobody understands why it gets inflamed. It's like moods and hatred, fear, love, and all those things, emotions. They come, and everybody's got their own fingerprint on that, and yet we all share at the same time, we can all share a common mood. And I think it's just far more than, sometimes I believe that the brain's so busy dealing with, pick up the spoon, put it in your mouth, walk across the room, figure out your laundry list.
No, all right. I'm sorry for interrupting. I mean, of course, the brain's incredibly complex and not greatly understood, although we're learning more and more about it all the time. The brain does everything, regulates body temperature, provides all your sensory input, controls your breathing, things that you don't think about. It's not just mundane things or active things, as conscious and subconscious. But my question, what it seems to me that you're doing, and I could be wrong, but this is the way I'm kind of reading it, is there's more going on than we're able to actually explain.
Oh, okay.
And rather than be comfortable with saying we don't yet know, but we're going to keep investigating, you're more comfortable with the idea that the soul could provide an explanation. And the question that I asked a minute ago is the one that seems most relevant. When we explain things, when we try to gain an understanding about how the universe works, we tend to explain things, the unexplained, in terms of the explained. There's a natural progress. We explain complex things in terms of the simpler things that make it up. We explain current events in terms of the past events that make it up, or that led to it. What we don't do, and what we're not justified in doing, is saying we don't have a good explanation for this. But here's this hypothetical, unproven thing that would seem to answer the question, even though we don't know anything at all about it. If the answer that you're supplying is less understood, potentially more complex, and indistinguishable from a number of other answers, How is it? It doesn't have any explanatory power. If you say that the reason for this is the soul, you could also say the reason for this is magic, or the reason for this is transdimensional pixies who sneak in and fire up your brain. There's no good way to distinguish between those answers to tell which one is more likely correct, which makes them all equally useless. They have no explanatory power. So I'm more comfortable saying, I don't know, and hopefully we'll find out someday, than I am saying, well, we can't explain it, so God works or soul works as an explanation, because they have no power to explain anything because they're not understood.
Okay, well, it's fair enough. So if you have a soul, say you don't believe in the soul per se, but you said there's a series of events that takes place in the brain, and then I call it a soul, you call it, say, I don't know, X or zebra or something, but you still revere that event that takes place, don't you? The way I revere soul. Like when I think of soul, I think of like soul music and people being soulful and caring about each other, helping each other out when they don't really have to.
See, I think you're talking about.
You have that. I'm sure you guys are nice guys. I know you feel that way too. You feel it, but you don't call it soul. You call it zebra or something.
I think you're talking about the kind of metaphoric soul that I was talking about early on.
Yeah, consciousness and the human spirit and stuff like that. It is amazing. Okay. It's. I don't know if I'd use the word revere exactly, but I understand your points in that, and I would agree with it. I just don't think it's anything supernatural. I think the ability, what abilities we do have to explain how this happens, chemical interactions, make it amazing enough in itself. Again, kind of another explanation I've heard in the past is I can enjoy going to the park and seeing the trees and the flowers and stuff like that, and that's good enough for me without believing that there are fairies and elves at the bottom of it to really make it magical and special for me. I can have as much fun there and enjoy it just as much without having to rely on that to really make it special. So, again, I think how the brain works and how we work, and in communities and personally and stuff like that. I think that's amazing and justified enough of awe that I don't need a spiritual explanation for it, of God or souls.
Well, I understand. Well, I appreciate your time. I think I've gone long enough, so I'll let somebody else talk. But thank you for your time.
Sure. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Studying the brain and how it works, what makes us us, explaining consciousness, those are all, interesting, at least to some of us, and huge topics that there may not currently be any kind of consensus on. The bigger point is that not having an answer puts you in a position of not having an answer. It doesn't put you in the position of justifying any panacea answer. It's like we've had people call in and say, well, if God didn't make the universe, then who did? Well, you're asking the wrong question. The correct question is based on the universe exists. There must be some explanation for it. What is the explanation? That question allows for the possibility that a God created the universe. It also allows for other possibilities. By saying, if God didn't, who did, you're narrowing the field. And you're narrowing it without any consideration that we don't know enough yet to narrow the field. So what's the explanation for how the universe came to exist? I don't know. There's a scientific theory about the origin of the cosmos as we understand it. It's called Big Bang Theory, which provides a good mathematical model. It is based on all of our current understanding, and it seems most likely correct, or at least as accurate as we can possibly get right now. There's a point at which, beyond the Planck time, we can't know. Even the math breaks down. So beyond that is speculation. So I'm fine saying I believe that the current Big Bang Theory, the explanation of origins, is the best scientific explanation based on our current knowledge. I'm not claiming that it's absolute truth. Absolute truth is nonsense. We don't know hardly anything to absolute certainty. It's a good explanation. It fits the science. And as soon as we have better information that would change it, I'm fine with that too, because science progresses. It progresses because it asks questions. It never pretends to have an answer that is unquestionable. So when we're fine with saying, I don't know how it happened, somebody else who's uncomfortable with that would say, well, there's this God thing that people have been talking about forever. Why couldn't there be an infinite, transcendent, intelligent being who created the universe? I don't see any reason to think that any such thing exists, but it's one of the possibilities. But how could you possibly know anything about that God? I mean, you don't even have any good reason to presume that it's required as an explanation. And the more extraordinary a claim is, the more evidence that's needed to support it. So natural explanations are preferable to supernatural. And yet, people are so uncomfortable with not knowing that it seems somehow okay to say, you know what, when I got this answer, God did it, and that's good enough for me.
People are very uncomfortable in general with "I don't know," or "I can't see it." And I mean, to a certain extent, I can understand it, but we also have this great need to label everything, and that I've always found is kind of strange. People would rather know that they have cancer than not know what the problem is. And to a certain extent, I can understand that, but to a certain extent, I guess I just don't see it.
Well, my biggest thing isn't that there's any problem with hypothesizing about possible explanations.
Oh, of course.
That's what gets us to the point where we increase our understanding. So yeah, you know, if you think that the universe or man or whatever is the special creation of God, investigate that hypothesis and see if you can come up with evidence. But if you dismiss evidence, as the first caller did, and just say, oh, it's something we take on faith, okay, fine. There's no reason why anybody else should be convinced to do that as well. You know, from that standpoint, I can't distinguish between any two religions on the planet.
Yeah, we're not asking anybody to just believe us.
Yeah.
Or just don't believe us or whatever.
Thank you for tuning in to the Atheist Experience. We have all the answers. Take
you
our
next
word
week.
for it.
Yeah, I mean, there are reasons to believe things, and you should have reasons to base your beliefs on rather than just, well, it feels good.
Yeah. As a reminder, the phone number is up on the screen. Anybody who doesn't get through today on the telephone or doesn't want to can email tv@atheist-community.org. We started early. We're taking calls. Anybody who wants to call in and talk about anything, we've got a few things we can discuss in the off time. And when the show's over, everybody involved in the show gets together and goes down to El Arroyo on 5th Street. We're on until 4:30. We'll be down at El Arroyo around 5 o'clock. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to join us. Membership isn't a requirement. You can come down, have a good conversation, grab a bite to eat, get something to drink. As long as you're not coming down to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch. I think what I'm going to do is shift from B words to, like R words at some time.
I have to come up with
Work
something different. Go through the alphabet.